Hi, this is Frank with a frank opinion. We have a lot going on in the United States right now. Chief among them is the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court and all of the baggage that he seems to be bringing with him. In the last 24 hours, we've heard from Michael Avenatti, someone who's becoming indelibly etched in our history, with a third witness that alleges incredibly vile activity by Brett Kavanaugh. But I want to kind of point out that even if we are lucky and Brett Kavanaugh is pulled as the nominee, we cannot stop there. This president cannot succeed in nominating and having confirmed a new Supreme Court justice. It will be a 5-4 body dominated by the most conservative interests that go against almost anything that you are fighting for at the present moment, whether it be women's rights, think Roe versus Wade, voter protections and outrageous ID laws, consumer protection, the fact that they're going after and dismantling the Consumer Protection Board, environmental protection, worker rights, the ability of workers to organize and unionize, campaign finance reform, a cementing of Citizens United and McCutcheon and dark money in our politics that favors only the very few, criminal justice reform that begins to undo the unbelievable incarceration of people of color for the most minute crimes conceivable. Climate change, probably the most existential threat that we have. Immigration reform, finally. Healthcare reform, universal healthcare, Medicare for all. Think about that. Tax reform, real tax reform, not reform like the third major tax cut bill that's looming on the horizon that gives money to the 0.1% in this country at the expense of working Americans. Civil rights, racial justice, a program to measurably reduce racism in our country at last. Yes, what we have here is a situation where we're actually becoming very lucky as these witnesses come forward alleging things that would absolutely disqualify any other nominee that was presented by any other party but the Republicans. Supreme Court, these are goalposts. This is what it's been about for years. And I hearken back to something that I have talked about many times before, the Powell Memorandum, also known as the Powell Manifesto, written by Lewis F. Powell Jr. in 1971 at the behest of the United States Chamber of Commerce. And he wrote what I have said before is the most brilliant plan for the complete corporate takeover of domestic and foreign policy of the United States. They're not interested in taking care of infant mortality. They're not interested in homelessness. They're not interested in proper health care for all Americans. They're not interested. Republican Party is not interested. They have to be dealt a crushing blow in November. But we cannot allow a fifth conservative, radical right justice to go on the Supreme Court. A little history. It started with Lewis F. Powell Jr., who went on the Supreme Court nominated by Nixon in 1972, and this is the Powell Memorandum, which I have urged everyone to read. The biggest paragraph, in my opinion, and it has been, is neglected opportunity in the courts. And Lewis F. Powell Jr. writes, under our constitutional system, especially with an activist-minded Supreme Court, the judiciary may be the most important instrument of social, economic, and political change. They've had their eye on the Supreme Court for almost 50 years. We cannot allow this to happen. So let me run through this. Lewis F. Powell Jr., nominated and confirmed to the Supreme Court from 1972, 1987, And what did that yield? Money is speech. Buckley versus Vallejo. He also was instrumental in the Supreme Court leaning in favor of corporate America since the day that he put his little toes on the Supreme Court. He was succeeded by Anthony Kennedy, who assumed his position in 1988 and retired mysteriously before the midterm elections in this past year. Anthony Kennedy, the so-called swing vote with regard to perhaps social issues, but like same-sex marriage, but on corporate issues, he wrote the opinion on Citizens United, which let corporations spend unfettered money on elections, and he was in favor of McCutcheon as well, versus FEC, that allows for individuals to spend whatever they want on elections. So Anthony Kennedy was a consistent apostle of the Powell Memorandum. We had the death of Scalia, so that brought on Gorsuch, still 4-4, but who assumes the next seat? Probably not Brett Kavanaugh because of everything that's coming out underneath the woodwork, but whoever it is, we can't allow a radical conservative led by the Powell Memorandum philosophy to assume that empty seat. Our work does not stop this Friday with the supposed hearing, and maybe it will be canceled. It cannot stop until we are assured a fair process that takes place after November for the selection of a Supreme Court nominee. I hope you get the drift of this. If I look a little bent, it's because my back is out and I'm a little pain here. But I felt that I had to remind people that we've only become lucky in the sense that Brett Kavanaugh's outrageous behavior in high school and college may cause him to become disqualified in the eyes of Republicans. The Republicans will continue to try to get somebody that is a radical conservative in this seat. That has to be stopped for all the issues that you care about. As I've said before, there's only one way that I can see to mount a campaign, and it has to be that representatives from organizations covering all of these issues have to band together, not isolated, not the climate change people in isolation from the immigration reform people, in isolation from the Black Lives Matter people to the environmentalists. No, there's got to be a coming together so that any movement, any thing that's done, action that's done, is massive and decisive. Thank you.